pleasure to welcome you all to the next talk in the Ceremony Speaker Series. We welcome Christian Lanng from TradeShift, winner of the Digital Disruptor category in the Circular Economy Awards in Davos in January. And I also welcome Ray Smith, Director of Economics at the CBI in the UK, and co-chair of the Circular Economy Task Force, to open the call and to welcome Christian.
Thank you, Quinton, and thank all of you for joining us this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are. I'm very delighted to be joined by Christian Lanng, the CEO and founder of TradeShift, and I know he's going to go through some of the reasons why this company, with its role connecting over 500,000 companies around the globe, is really pushing forward some of the principles of the circular economy. And we were delighted to see them as the winner of the Digital Disruptor Award last year. Christian has an amazing background. He started his first technology company at the age of 19, when certainly I was just finishing school. He's also been one of the leading proponents in IT within the Danish government. He's a member of the Global Agenda Council on the Future of Software and Society, advisor to the EC on the digital agenda. So he's that sort of wealth of knowledge and experience. So I'm really delighted that Christian is joining us. I'm all impressed that he's got up in the middle of the night from Hawaii to be able to present to us. So to you, Christian, and really looking forward to some of your insights on TradeShift.
Well, thank you, Rain, and thank you everybody here for the chance to speak. And yes, you are right. It's 4 a.m. in the morning here, so if I sound sleepy, but more than happy to be here and speak to you all. I better preface this whole speech by being not an expert on the circular economy. In fact, it's less than a year ago that I was really introduced to concepts of the circular economy and the whole around it. But what I'm about is large companies and how they work. And TradeShift especially, we do work with some of the largest companies in the world. We work with companies like YGL, Nike, etc., and are helping them form their business. And what we do is we provide a way to connect with all of their suppliers and their business in a digital manner. So that's the background I come from. That's where we are, and that's where I'm building my understanding on the circular economy from. Today it's not going to be a lot about TradeShift. It's going to be 1 hour long advertising about what we do. So I promise you it should be interesting. But talk about instead is actually the context of which the circular economy sits within. So the circular economy is obviously happening in a lot of companies, and how a lot of companies are thinking about how they're using resources and how the supply chains works. But what I want to talk about is the that's happening around this and why we're seeing so much change in companies right now. And I actually think it's an extremely exciting time. I don't think there has been more change and disruption in the Fortune 500 last 5 years, and I think the disruption to come is many times bigger than that. I apologize. I know I speak a little fast, so if you have questions, feel free to type them in. We'll take them at the end, and I'll try to keep in mind not to speak too fast. So a little bit, and I just want to confirm that everybody can see my screen. I think you can. What I want to talk about is what I call the death of big business as we know it, because there's a huge transformation happening. In ways, we won't be able to recognize what we thought about as Fortune 500, I think, in 5-10 years from today. So we all know how big business used to work. I think most of us who went to business school. We reckon this model. This is Porter's model of a value chain. It's pretty simple. We have inbound logistics, we have operations, we then have outbound logistics, marketing, sales, and services, and then we have support activities supporting this value chain. Most companies today slice into these boxes in some other. The way might be a little bit different, but most are heavily dependent on the supply chain. Most are heavily dependent on marketing and sales and the service provided around it. But what's interesting is that recently started to throw a wrench into this model, and a lot of companies are going back and looking at the core model of doing business. And one of the reasons that this is happening, probably the primary reason, is something as Moore's law. And Moore's law is a very simple thing. It's predicted by then the CEO and today Intel, who stated that every second year the number of transistors in the CPU will double and it will cost the same. We all know this intuitively. We know that computers are getting faster. We know that our smartphones are getting thinner. We know our laptops are getting thinner, all of this. But it's very hard to grasp on what this really means. An example, I'm sitting here with my iPhone 6 in my hand, and I don't have a camera on, but if you did, you see I'm holding it up. And the CPU inside this phone cost $4 million in 1995. The American government, they bought a supercomputer that can do as the CPU in your phone. $54 million for this CPU. Today, the same CPU, the same core processing unit, costs $100. And as a intuitively, we know that we get stuff that is smarter, thinner, faster. That's gone from $54 million to $300 million, less than 25 years, is absolutely outstanding. I don't think there's a lot of nation in the world today that can match that kind of price drop. And that's having a huge impact on everything. And I think what we're seeing now is that Moore's law is bleeding into the physical world. It's gone from the digital to starting to hit the physical world, and by that also starting to hit a lot of business models. So what I really like is innovation, and what innovation is doing to the world of us. So today we all heard about 3D printers. We know that these cute things that can plastic figures and people are playing around with. But in this, the world's first 3D printed car was built from scratch, all 3D printed parts. Now, this is probably still not the best car in the world, but it is completely 3D printed. So it's fair to say that 3D printers are going from toys to real manufacturing very, very quickly. And Siemens, they're now 3D printing for windmills into other materials near the windmill farms because have huge warehouses of specialty sitting around, and it's also very expensive to have a windmill shut down while you're shipping the right part. So now they can produce the part on hand close to the need, and obviously this is not just plastic; it's steel, it's any material you need. This is from rethinking robotics. Up till recently, it used to cost millions of dollars to put manufacturing robots into production, into supply chain. Robotics, they completely changed the game. You can get the cheapest robots for around $50,000 to $100,000. But what's really interesting about them is that you use robots how to do manufacturing, not by programming it, not by needing a computer science degree, but just using the robot by the hand and moves it needs to do. Is that we are bringing automated manufacturing within reach of everyone. Which used to be something that was only available to Fortune 500 companies, something that used to be hugely specialized and very expensive to set up. It's as easy as you probably easier even. So automating the manufacturing is getting incredibly accessible. An example of how Moore's law is starting to impact the physical, and I'll come back obviously to how all of this is connected to the circular economy. But this is the Google self-driving car. I think we all seen it in the news. We all heard about it. But what's actually more interesting about the self-driving car is that in 5 years when it came out, the car, they were even bigger and cost $70,000. It's a assisted radar. It collects 1.3 million data points per second. It's let's say a bit more aware than any human driver can ever be. The car industry, they're laughing at Google and they're saying, "Oh my God, this is so typical. The Silicon tech company living up in the clouds, putting in a car that costs $70,000. How can you even think about selling a car when it costs $70,000?" In the 5 years since then, that has gone from the size you see here to this. So this is a prototype tablet from Google called Tango. I got one of these in December. It costs $1,000. It packs the same version of the sensor, but it's in the size of the tablet. So this really impressive technology has gone the size of something that sits in the roof of a car to something that fits inside a tablet in less than 5 years. And at the same time, it dropped from $70,000 to $1,000. Interesting here is, and this is what the car industry is starting to realize as well, constantly adding on Moore's law. Innovation that seems impossible, technology that seems out of reach, will be portable, scalable, and accessible within 2 to 3 years from them starting down the path. So they're making all of these crazy bets, knowing that technology will keep up with their vision. And it's hard to get our head around what does this mean. We get even faster laptops, faster smartphones. No, all of these innovations, they're not technology as we used to. This is computer technology bleeding into the real world, into the physical world. And dealing with this is obviously exponential innovation, and exponential innovation is very hard to predict. There's a story about the guy who invents the chess game and goes to the emperor, and the emperor said, "Oh my God, this is exciting and amazing game. How can I reward you for this innovation?" And "Oh, I'm a simple guy. I'm a humble guy. I'm just a little hungry. So if I can get some for my village, I would be more than happy." So he said, "Why don't we use the game I just invented maybe as figuring out how much? So if you just 1 corn of rice on the first field and 2 of rice on the next one and 4 and so on." Everybody thinks, okay, this guy, he's really very humble. He don't want a lot of rice. But I'll take this and you put it up to the order of 64. It's 5 times the rice in the world. So he realizes this, he loses his head, and there's probably some morale not asking the emperor for more than he's willing to give. But I think the morale is that we have a very hard time dealing with exponential innovation, exponential anything. And in a way, the way we can think about technology development is that for the last 10 years, what we see is really just the first half of the chessboard. Understand it's the part that we can sort of predict. We're making a very big mistake if we think the next 10 years will be near of the last 10 years. The next 10 years is an exponential innovation on top of what we have, and a lot of these technologies is now starting sort of to multiply each other. 3D printing, virtual reality, AI, are all starting to add up and adding together. And I think this is where it becomes interesting and close to the circular economy. This is impacting big companies in different ways. And if you think about Porter's value chain, the thing is that all of the input, the supply, the manufacturing, how we produce, how we ship, is how companies used to do these things has been very predictable for the last 30 years. We've been doing things in a certain way, building stuff in a certain way, shipping stuff. Maybe we'd have like 10% material innovation year over year with small jumps in production methods, but overall, it's been a fairly stable input. And what now is that we're completely seeing huge leapfrogs across the board. So Tesla's big innovation was not so that they built an electrical car, but that they built an electrical car the way that we normally build PCs by using commoditized technologies like laptop batteries, but production methods that are closer to how Apple built laptops than GM built cars. And it's really enabled them to build a luxury car at a cost point that's very, very competitive, and at the same time bring in a lot of innovative technologies and innovate very, very fast on the core model they do. One thing for most people who own a Tesla is also that this Tesla changes behavior constantly because they put new behavior as software updates. The easiest way to think about the Tesla is actually not that it's a car. It's a software platform with 4 wheels built as a software platform. Speaking with a company who said Tesla's valuation is completely unfair. They're a company valued at $50 billion, but they only produce 50,000 cars. We produce 500,000 cars, and we're valued at $5 billion. That's because Tesla not a car company. Tesla is a technology company, and they're being evaluated as such. And the big reason allowing them to be a technology company was a complete change of how they run their supply chain. So what we're seeing is that production methods from supply chains that are more advanced, more mature, is now jumping category. Disruption within industries. What used to be one way of building cars is now a completely different way of building cars. What used to be one of, I'll come back to that, generating medicine or doing other areas, is also learning from these different industries. So we are seeing disruption caused by technologies jumping from one supply chain to another. And very rapid innovation right now is innovation. So due to artificial intelligence, to our use of very advanced modeling tools, we can now build and create materials that was not available to us before. And the example is from a famous clothing company who have been building more or less the same way for the last 30 years. They came across a new technology where knitting the whole shoe together, they were weaving it's like a spider is creating its web, but using obviously, different materials. This was almost a 40% drop in cost of production of the shoe. And what's very interesting is it was also creating a shoe, it was creating a more flexible shoe, it was more options for coloring, all of these things. So the thing about building a shoe just dramatically better while you also had a dramatic cost of production. Now, the interesting is that this particular company, this is our big breakthrough that we're going to monetize the next 10 years, and it's really going to change the shoe business. They said, we think similar breakthroughs will now happen every 2 years. We've got to be ready to completely disrupt how we're building things every 2 years, or behind, we're going to be disrupted by somebody who will do the same. So we used to see material innovation being a long-term game. They're now saying production methods, material, and then other things will change every 2 years, and we need to be a completely new company in how we're doing this every 2 years. And 3D printing, the next generation of 3D printers, they can produce in different materials. They can work like self-assembling polymers, etc. They work together with 3D scanners, so you can model things. And I had a discussion with Seth's shoe company, and I was talking back and forth about what did this actually mean. And this is also part of our work over in the Global Agenda Council for the Future of Software and Society. That we're definitely looking at is that 3D printing will become mainstream within the next 10 years. You have to picture what regular printers. So you remember when we had the first generation of old school laser printers that was as big as a fridge, and they were standing at the company, and it's very new technology. In a short amount of time, we suddenly had these very tiny printers in our homes, and it just went away because everything was more or less digital. I don't even remember what my printer is anymore. But this evolution is happening even faster with 3D printers, although they're a lot more complex than regular printers. So with the shoe company, I was sort of saying, what will in the future when consumers pirate copying your shoes at home? And then I said, Christian, this is really not a problem for us because we trust that it's so big that we'll just sell them a digital shoe. And our digital brand will be bigger than our physical one. And stunned Because even imagining as a consumer that I'm buying my shoes the same way I'm buying an app in the app store. I still think for most of us it's so science fiction. Can we really imagine having this print at home, producing our shoe? And they said, as years we're rolling out next generation 3D printing technology in our retail stores, and you'll be able to walk in from the street, have foot scanned, and have a shoe produced on site that you can bring home that's completely customized to your foot. Fiction. It's happening right now, and it's coming out there. And what's for this particular business is that you really know what supply chain then. What is and what are you selling? Because suddenly your supply chain becomes all of the consumers using your goods who have this 3D printer at home or in the store, and you become a very, very different company. So when we start thinking about the changes that are happening to, let's say, the linear economy, and when we start to think about moving to the circular economy, remember business as it is today is not a static target. Business today is changing rapidly from other forces that is driving huge transformation of these companies. But also interesting as the input becoming unstable is that the output is becoming unstable. Demand is changing. And where demand used to be a very predictable function of marketing budget, that's gone out the window. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Porter's value chain with output. And what's interesting is, first, consumers don't care about ownership. And this is something we talk about in the circular economy, talk about access over ownership. For the first time in 30 years, American teenagers that don't have owning a car on the top 10 list of things they want to own. They want a smartphone. And obviously, these phones, they have cool apps like Uber or Lyft or something else where I can get a car in 3 minutes from wherever I am. And car ownership is really becoming service. It was interesting because I was talking to a huge car company, and they're saying, we're going to sell a ton of cars to these new, and we're basically going to just sell to them like we are to the cab companies and everybody else. We might even build like ride-sharing cars for these companies with a lot of technology built in. These companies, they're biggest competitors, right? Today, they spend 94% of their time. If it's Uber or Lyft, you need 94% less cars in the world. And I think it's a bit of a shock for them. People thought in the model of ownership. And I think it's becoming very, very clear, and these discussions are happening right now. Another example is another car company who's doing self-driving cars, and they have discussions if they should move into that space. And these companies are a classic car company, but they chose to market what they're doing with self-driving cars. You could build because the car will correct all of the human mistakes you make when you're driving the car. You can still drive it, but the computer would override the stupidity, and which is by the cause for most car crashes out there. They have some really, really good technology. This technology will do what it promises. The challenge was, Joe, that 90% of their profits cost spare parts itself. So a car company earning all of your money from spare parts, selling cars that don't crash and don't need spare parts. And pushing down this route of innovation, you're a company. So are now completely thinking differently about their business. This particular company they might stop selling cars altogether and only provide them as a service, a managed service. It's not just happening in the consumer space, it's also happening on a broader level. And I think this is something that affects the circular economy deeply. They is starting to buying materials, they're starting to buy outcomes. Robots, to a very large degree, started this whole evolution by putting you in, rather than selling you a jet engine, you would leave the hour, they call it power by the hour. And fuel with the low cost of sensors that have connected software. The engines, they will monitor everything on an airplane. They will talk back to Rolls-Royce command center. And if ever so slightly is changed or wrong with this engine, the moment it lands, there will be a whole team ready to service it with right spare parts. As an airline, you're buying a complicated engine. You need to have the knowledge in-house to maintain. service. Which I heard, which I thought was great, was from a big car company. And he said, the CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer there, he said, Christian, I don't want to buy 50,000 drill bits, 15,000, I don't care about drill bits. What I want is to the holes of quality in a certain diameter. And that's changing everything how this company is buying stuff. They buy material. They don't want to buy things. They want to buy an outcome. To this company, you got to figure out how do you deliver an outcome. How do you deliver a product? How do you deliver a service? Is steps toward what we will see a circular economy, but these guys are articulating a circular economy. They're not even thinking about this as a circular economy. They're thinking about this as a good business. When I learned more about the circular economy, it was clear to me that a lot of the concepts, they're already happening in business, and people are just not aware that they're pushing in direction. I want to have about how buying and selling is changing is that demand and planning is fluctuating in more cycles. So many of my examples is from the car industry, but I've just been working with a lot of these car companies recently. A car company, they lost $600 million in one quarter because that didn't meet the demand of the consumers. So 5 years ago, they started with 2 cars. They thought would be a low-end sort of pickup kind of car. Another one car would be like a high-end luxury kind of car. Was that the luxury high-end car completely tanked due to media reviews that absolutely hated this car and made jokes of it. The car that was supposed to be like the pickup kind of truck low-end car got really popular because it got some reviews in places they didn't expect, but different interiors. So people wanted interior, they wanted upgrades, and they never foresaw that this car would sell in that category. And it's not just happening within cars, it's also happening with almost any area you can imagine. And one thing happening is that social media is amplifying a lot of things that go ahead are good, but it's that the demand cycle for consumers is flattening. Quite honestly, we're interested in things for shorter amounts of time. We really care for less time. Doing is it's wreaking havoc on a lot of production cycles. And to start to think about this in the future, I think what you realize is that companies need to be able to meet demand on very short cycles, which can lead to extremely efficient production because you got to set up your whole business to do just-in-time production, or to huge waste because you're trying to build up warehouses of all sorts of different products, and if they don't sell, you will just have to take the cost. And also lends itself to a service model. A lot of people are leasing cars so they can change their car more frequently, but it's up to the company then to take on the whole ownership and service of the car. So I think this is driving us towards an access economy, over ownership, as demand cycles they flatten. So what we did, if you're a large company now, is actually an extremely unstable situation because both the value chain is changing radically and it's becoming, I think, more importantly, very, very hard to predict, right? So on one side, we have huge change in manufacturing. Innovation is driving new materials. Consumers can now produce. We're seeing completely different ways of doing things. And it gets harder and harder to predict what are the winners. It's not like you can just create a 5-year plan and go implement it. You got to be ready about technologies that are not even invented yet. And in a particular shoe company, ask them to say, okay, so who do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for your company? Is it like Adidas? Is it, Alma? And they're like, no. The biggest for our company is a company born within the next 5 years and different set of technologies, different set of materials that we're about yet. And that's how the business is set up to try to figure out what is that and stay on our toes. The same thing on the outbound cycle, so marketing, sales, services, harder and harder for these companies to predict what will sell, what will be successes, what will be flops. So you're in a situation right now where both sides of the value chain are highly unstable. A lot of this instability is driven by more the digitalization of the whole universe around this and the access of materials and so on as a consequence. So if we want to talk about the circular economy, and if we really want to talk about the change leading into creating something like the circular economy for the long run, this is the context it exists within. Really good news. This is really good news for using and launching something like the circular economy, because what's happening in these companies, how they're thinking about the business. Of course, you don't navigate, you might very well end up like this company, Blockbuster, who not only failed to see that the product they were producing and selling, rental DVDs, was the old-fashioned technology, and it's clear, the cloud would be overtaking this. Netflix and all of these services was completely changing the production methods in their industry. And the marketing and delivery methods and model changed as well. There was no need to have huge stores, retail locations. Everything about the business changed. And to navigate fast enough, so what they ended up was really with all of their stores closing. How did we end up here? Because it's not for these Fortune 500 companies, for these big companies to go bankrupt. It's not for these companies to go out of business. They exist for 30, 50, hundreds of years. They're very stable businesses. They grow 10% over the year. And so the landscape, where whole industries can just be obliterated overnight. So that we end up here is that companies, they're not agile. They're not learning and having feedback loops in place. Because what we know as a startup is that when the world is highly unstable, when everything is very chaotic, then you got a much smaller innovation and idea loop. You're going to build from ideas. You're going to have a product. You're going to measure the impact. You're going to monitor all of the data, and you're going to learn. You're going to move in these cycles very fast. They have extremely fast learning, and they apply them to everything we do. The biggest thing about building Tradeshift, and we've gone from 300 people, from 0 people to 300 people over 5 years. The biggest Tradeshift has not just been our innovation, but also how fast we do our internal process innovation, how we're thinking and making decisions as a company, and how we're scaling out that decision power. Large companies is that they have little ability to move. They have very little ability to change course. Once they're set, they can maybe, if they're lucky, correct their course, 5% a year. The challenge, though, is that they need to correct it maybe 30 or 40% a year right now. And this is what happens if they don't. They just run aground. Why is this? Why is it that large companies, they have such a hard time changing? Not just generally, but also when we're looking at stuff like circular economy, all of these areas. It makes total sense for a lot of companies that they should based models, that they should reclaim the goods, that they should think about the upcycle supply chain, all of these things. You're just not implementing. And one of the reasons is that in 30 years, the big mantra in the business world has been to optimize for cost. Obsessed about how we can have the lowest possible cost, how the business is most efficient. We have people here from Accenture. That's been a big part of what not just Accenture, but everybody has trying to drive at. How can you run your business efficient and as cost effective as possible? Just focusing on cost is the idea when business is predictable. And how we've been optimizing is also our software systems. So we have these huge ERP systems, our processes into BPOs in India, and what we end up with is something that's very efficient, very low cost, but also static. Because of that, we're standardizing all of our internal business processes to arrive at a low cost. Environment. This works in a predictable environment. This worked in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, because business was predictable. Business was predictable. The rules were the same. What we're entering now is hugely different. Everything changing. Input, new materials, new innovation, new business models, new delivery ways. So what we see is the change is becoming the core KPI. And the low cost of change, not just the low cost of operations. They have such a hard time reacting because set up for the former, not the latter. It's how we standardize our business processes. changed a lot. If you look at a modern ERP system today, it's a descendant of how we used to run businesses 150 years ago. Process data is a descendant of how Ford built his assembly lines. Somebody took a piece of paper, somebody digitized it, somebody makes a decision, yes, no, maybe. It goes to the next person in the chain that makes a decision, yes, no, maybe. So all the internal processes, all the boring stuff, static. And it's built around concepts that are very linear. And on the side, on the manufacturing side, we changed most of these things. Most companies who do manufacturing today, they're not just using linear processes. They're using Kaizen, they're using lean manufacturing. A huge part of it is that the people on the ground floor, the people on the assembly line, they learn, they do mild quality control, they can feed back value into the system, and they can change on the fly. But and how these companies run has not changed the last 30 years. And one example, as I used, was the software. The way our software runs and works is not very different from how we've been doing business for the last 30 years. And what it's really a situation where the input and the output is predictable, but our businesses are static. And being down for these companies and what forcing such hard change is, if we start the circular economy, I think the primary thing that we look at if we want to be successful in a bigger change. And one of the things we look at right now is this pressure building inside these companies to change. And it's happening. It's also happening from within. So some of the big factors right now is that we're seeing a millennial workforce. However, most of the workforce coming into these companies is less than, is from a generation that had smartphones as the primary computing device, not PCs, that are used to nice things that just work, big use of Twitter, Facebook, etc. Expect, that they do and work with to be connected. We see cloud and big data just drive down the cost of digitization. When SAP Oracle was built, the idea was that digitization was extremely expensive, and it was only a few companies who could really afford it. It was only few companies that could afford the connectivity and creating digital supply chains. Today, it's a commodity. Everybody can do it. Everybody can connect. Collaboration inside these companies, where in the old days, buying materials, you're just buying stuff from your supply chain. Today, supply chain is also your innovation, basic huge services. So around Boeing, they have contractors that is building huge parts of engines, doing services around all of the sensors and so on. And these companies are completely seamless parts of Boeing from that. But, speaking, it's actually a third-party company providing these services. So it's also hugely more complex and a lot more collaboration to function. And finally, we are seeing mobile becoming the default in business processes. And just step through it. So to really get a sense of how this is changing, I talked a little bit about how they have a different view on software. So today, 2 million apps, and this is 6 months old, so it's, by the way, hugely outdated. App Store, and they pay out $20 billion to developers. What's interesting, and I think really fascinating, is that this whole industry is in 2007. So in years, it's been created from scratch that has out more than $20 billion to third-party developers. And obviously, what it has trained us as consumers is that something we can consume very easily by clicking on a button on our phones. We can install it. If we don't like it, we can get rid of it in 5 minutes, and we can try something new. Used to the processes in our life, the way that we do business, the way we work. Why? We used to be able to be connected using our smartphones. We used to everything being adaptable. We get into these huge companies, and a real example was actually one of our customers who moved actually from China to Manila, and in 4 months, moved the machines, all the infrastructure, hired all the people, but it took them 18 months to supporting SAP process to support this physical move. So we today, where for a lot of these companies, is a lot faster than the digital because we focus so much on efficiency and not really on what's the cost of change for us. They're entering the workforce quite rapidly. So the grade here you see is millennials. So 5 years, more than 50% of your employees will be millennials. Very different requirements to the workplace, not just that everything digital work in a smart way, also that they want meaningful jobs. They want to have jobs that are impacting the world in a positive way. So if you want to recruit the best talent in the future, you think about things like the circular economy. You got to think about how is your company impacting the world, and you're going to guide them with processes that are smart, that are how private lives are. Social media is becoming completely pervasive in our lives. The one here in the middle is the fast-growing set of social networks in the world. It's owned by a Chinese company, Tencent. It's WeChat and QQ. And what it means is that millions and millions of consumers are now being available on these services, but also companies. Availability of all of these consumers also means that we can sell stuff to them in new ways. We can deliver stuff to them in new ways. It's driven stuff like in now cities where you can access all of the services using WeChat, from getting a car to having a payroll to paying at McDonald's, also enabling new service models and new delivery models because the consumers they're connected. Interesting is that in most of the emerging markets, the picture is already inverted. We did the study in China from a perspective. We found that 7% of the companies that we dealt with, our customers they dealt with, smartphone. 9% had a tablet. 6% had a PC. What this means is that if you want to have a connected supply chain, if you really create ways of managing all of the extra information around the supply chain, if we want to measure what's the impact of our supply chain, if we want to ask suppliers about their water usage, how they're doing all of these things, we need to have the digital platforms available to connect them and to collect all of this information so we can make the right decisions. And platforms need to be time, they need to be mobile, they can't just be based on PCs, they can't be based on how we think in the West. And if we don't create financial inclusion and connectivity for the long term, this will never happen. So I believe personally we can better. I'm aware that I'm almost done, so I'll be pretty quick for that. I think that we can create a world that's mobile first, that's network based rather than sort of the old database model. We are connecting not just one company, but we're connecting thousands and thousands of companies, and this is what Tradeshift does. I believe that we can move from what we call the cost-focused supply chain, where we're just focusing on squeezing out costs, ability as a cost, we're seeing the ability to conserve capital as a plus, ultimately putting our suppliers at risk, to a model where we rather than buying cost, we're buying value, that in innovation, we're seeing sustainability and quality as strategic differentiators, and we about our partners in the supply as a value chain and not just the cost, so when companies grow, we win too. This is at the foundation of the circular economy. We don't change our look on the supply chain. If we don't think about value-focused supply chain over a cost-driven one, we won't be in a position where we can do a lot of these things that we're trying to do. What we need to be successful in the circular economy, to zoom in one level, is a lot of additional information that we don't have today. We need much better tracking all of the inputs and the outputs. We need to have the certifications in place from every single step in the process. And we have a lot more data exchange. Our estimate is that it's around 5 times the data that is being exchanged today in the supply chain that we need to manage and collect, and not just from the largest suppliers, but every single step in the supply chain. Then we need about the product life cycle, and we need to measure the impact so we can actually prove that this is having an effect. And this is a platform we're trying to come in and not just provide like one tool, but be the connecting network that can put a lot of these pieces together and then have third parties build on top of that. So we're working with Bill McDonough and others to see what kind of applications can be built on top of the Tradeshift platform that can help track and manage all of this data. I just want to zoom out because I know I don't have too much time. I want to show the stuff that we're doing where you can manage as a supplier, you can manage all of your certificates. If you're a cradle supplier, you can prove this. You can prove for every single line item what you're doing. You can manage how much of your spend that is green. and how much is being done in a certified way, and this goes multiple levels down in the supply chain. Going back to the bigger topic, how can these bigger companies avoid this disruption? How can they navigate in this sort of unstable environment? Well, they have the ability to change both from a strategic and tactical perspective, and away from the cost efficiency as the only driver when you're looking at your own internal processes. You can create buying power. You can make more efficient buying decisions, spread out all over the globe. You can be a new business, and I originally said every 5 years, but a few of my customers corrected me and said probably every 2 years. What does it take to be a complete new business? It's YGL or Nike or somebody else every 2 years, and that's a radical change. And ultimately, you can move to much faster decision loops, much faster learning loops, because is true is that the one way forward. You've got to be experimenting. You're going to be running hundreds of experiments, both on the consumer side, product side, and the supply chain side, to see what works. And you do that constantly. That's the biggest change to your business. I'll stop and open up to questions. I know this was a little bit quick here in the end, and I probably lose track of time, but I think we should still have time for questions.
Thank you so much, Christian. That was brilliant. I mean, and I think it just really scratched the surface of what we see as the potential for in the circular economy. And I think, one thing that I just highlight there is, we're talking about 30 million devices coming online by 2020. The advent of the Internet of Things. Touched on at the end there, that provide visibility in areas that we are only beginning to imagine now. So thinking about supply chains, thinking about how goods move around, thinking about anticipating demand and supply patterns. Those analytics and kind of intelligence can really help us make more efficient use of the resources which are available, and hopefully be an important building block in the circular economy. So really fantastic insight there. Thank you. Coming in, we've got a number of questions from attendees that we'd like you to respond to, Christian. And I'm going to hand over to Rain, because I think Rain has those and would like to lead that part. Over to you, Rain.
Christian, maybe a good place to start. There's quite a few questions. Towards the end of your presentation, you talked a little bit about how you've been able to sort of put in place some key performance indicators or ways of companies being able to monitor their supply chain and how green some of their suppliers might be. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, with maybe some examples of those key performance indicators. And one sort of related question is, whether you had any sense of sort of what percentage of your consumer base is using those KPIs to try and measure some of the sustainable practices that are in their own suppliers.
So I think, just to give you one example, what we're helping a lot of companies right now manage and work with is that once they connect the supply chain and once the supply chain is digital, so initially on like simple things like with all of our invoices and pay electronically, move down and look in more and more areas of the business to say how can we use this connectivity. One of the things actually quite often quickly is risk. How to manage risk. How do we know which suppliers are the good ones, which ones are the bad ones? And you can look sort of in a very simplistic way. This is risk the company I'm dealing with will go pop or will go out of business. Or you can look in a strategic perspective and say, is it aligned with our values? Is this company innovating fast enough? It's within this area that we've seen sort of the biggest growth, I think, of what you would call green metrics or sustainability metrics. So it have been, having companies self-report on their water usage. To give example, and it's typically done top down. So when a company like Nike says we want all this data, suppliers will provide it. We help the suppliers by giving them a digital platform that's very easy to provide this information. Party audits of this information you can have that as well. And if you don't want to have the party data available to the company, but just the stamp, you can do that as well. I would say, I mean, it's probably like 10-15% of our customer base that is starting to provide these programs, but it's growing fast as they're looking at all the data from the supply chain. This is probably one of our fastest growing areas.
Sort of picking up on that, do you there a sort of demonstration effect in that it's to sort of show some of your customers how your customers have been using some of these indicators to track the credentials of some of their suppliers? Sort of a network effect, do you think?
It absolutely does, but I think more importantly than that, it's all things that we're seeing on the use of the Tradeshift platform has not been done because it's a CSR program or because it looks good. It's because these companies, they're worried about these metrics. If you're a huge, I haven't mentioned the name, but if you're a huge consumer goods product, food production, you're really concerned around water usage because that's a strategic resource for you. So I think, yes, there's a huge part of demonstration, but the way we go and do the demonstration is that we say, hey, here's a company doing good with our platform. What we're doing is saying, here's a company managing a strategic resource that are really important for their business using our platform. And I think what that is, we're trying to digitize everything you do in business, and as digitalization is driving down the cost of the data that they can collect, they want to collect a lot more data, including sustainability data.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think another question is a bit more strategic and looking forward to some of the sort of bigger challenges we have. And I guess from your presentation, I get the idea that you're a big optimist in terms of technology and just the speed of action, its ability to address the problems we have out there. So I'm an optimist over the long term in terms of technology being able to overcome some of these problems there from change and from the move to more businesses.
I am to a large degree, and there are multiple reasons for that, right? I mean, technology over the last 30, 50 years is the driver for dematerialization. We have stuff in the world today because of technology. We have less stuff in our homes because of digitalization. And so the driver, obviously, we're also scrapping more gadgets, and there are huge challenges around rare earth materials and how we get rid of obsolete gadgets. But as humanity, this has reduced the amount of stuff that we have and we need to own. But I think more importantly, lately, it has technology that's about new business models, which is a perfect example of something that's a complete social economy kind of company were not possible before we all had smartphones with GPSs in our pockets. Now, what gets possible when every single table sold by a huge Swedish furniture manufacturer will have a chip in the table telling you about the life cycle of the table, where it is, what it can do, etc. So I think the continued digitalization of the world is certainly also driving a dematerialization of the world. And I think if you look at climate change, I don't have all of the answers, and I definitely think it's a hairy topic. But I don't think, and I think this is sort of very aligned with the circular economy, I think reduction can get us there. I don't think it's possible to reduce ourselves that we are today with 7 billion people to a better climate. I think we got to figure out how can we integrate ourselves into a position where we can manage, the growth of humanity in the future. And I think actually we are making massive strides towards that. Meditation has been driven by artificial intelligence to a large degree now, and we need very small improvements in stuff like solar energy for that to become sustainable as an energy source. So I am optimistic overall.
That's helpful. I'm conscious we're coming up to the hour, but maybe we want a bit of your background, entrepreneur, but also from policy. And we're going to facilitate these sorts of innovation to try and address these challenges and to have businesses and other economies principles being sort of diffused throughout the economy. What do you think? Do you think it's more a role for policy or business in facilitating those changes?
That's a good question, and I apologize in advance to my friends at the EC, but I've been on both sides of the equation, and I think this will happen because it's a great idea for business, and I think we got to stop thinking about circular economy solutions. I don't think a company in the world is ever going to buy circular economy software. I don't think companies will be buying circular economy solutions. I think companies are buying solutions to run their businesses better. And it's fairly obvious that managed services, call it circular economy, but managed services, looking at reclaiming your supply chain and reusing all of that is a business model. And I think that will move from the 10% within the next 5 years. I do think that regulation can help in the way that it's, for instance, incentivizing, solar and some of these things. All I think we talk about how this is at the core of the DNA of how we're doing business. And as companies, they realize that this is just a for the future. It'll happen fast. And I to probably 80% of the leaders in the Fortune 500 in the last year, and all of them are huge disruptive change coming for their industries and their companies, and that's the opportunity that we are feeding into as a whole.
Christian, this is a great question, and hopefully, so I'll go from. If you were to put $1,000 on the next big disruptor, who would it be? So I want to say that anything I say is should not constitute investment advice. Of course. But I personally think the next big disruption you're going to be seeing, and I don't unfortunately have the connection. Somebody else can maybe do it more than me. Sure.
Have the connection to the circular economy now, but the next disruption you'll be seeing is around virtual reality. The whole idea of screens and TVs as platforms is going to disappear. It's going to disappear scale fast. Virtual reality is something we all know from the 80s and the 90s in these corny movies, and which is now becoming mainstream. There's at least 4 products out there from Microsoft, from Oculus Rift, from Leap that are completely game-changing. I think that will put data for everyone almost everywhere. Mark Zuckerberg, he said it best when he had to put the for why he was buying Oculus Rift at a $2 billion valuation. A company have a prototype, and he said vision is the next platform. Extremely interesting technology. I think it's coming up fast. Apart from talk about artificial intelligence will take longer, but it will be more impactful on the world as a whole. Be a massive change.
Well, probably a great place to leave it as we come up to the question. I just want to say thank you so much for your time and for all your insights. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought and a great insight into technology and how it's changing the world. So I just want to thank you. And then I don't know if I'll hand back to Quinten, who may just want to say a few words about our next webinar in a few weeks' time. And we will also be reaching out for more applications for this year's Circular Economy Awards.
Well, thank you so much, Rain, and thank you so much, Christian. A fantastic talk. To get back to bed or maybe go for a dawn run on the beach now, so thank you for getting up at such an ungodly hour to speak. Much appreciated. As Rain's mentioned, the series will be continuing, so look out for details of the next in the speaker series coming through to your inbox, and we've got a number of exciting speakers planned over the next weeks, so do look out for that. We've also will be opening for entries for the 2016 Circular Economy Awards this so again, do get involved with that, and there will be an opportunity perhaps to become the next Circular Economy Digital Disruptor. Without further ado, thank you so much for attending, and thank you, Rain, thank you, Christian, for presenting and moderating, and look forward to seeing you all in the next Speaker Series event. Take care. Bye now.